When a child's given the ninja headband of their village, they're expected to become a shinobi, which means making grown-up decisions that no child should ever have to make. Such was the case with Itachi Uchiha. At the age of 13 years old, an age where most kids are still in the process of figuring out who they think they want to become as a person, who they think they have a crush on, and worrying about other trivial adolescent matters, Itachi wasn't afforded such a luxury. Danzo approached him with an ultimatum: betray and slaughter your clan, or side with your clan and be destroyed. The dilemma for Itachi was a real one. On one hand, if he agreed to Danzo's terms, he knew full well that he'd be stopping a coup d'etat that, if successful, would lead the village too shattered to defend itself from foreign countries seeking to conquer Konoha during its time of vulnerability. On the other hand, Itachi could have refused and sided with his clan against the very village that he loved, knowing full well if he did so, Konoha's plans were to handle the coup d'etat, which is also backed up in the Naruto manga. According to the second Itachi light novel, The Book of Midnight, had Hiruzen's last-ditch efforts to speak with Fugaku Uchiha have fallen on deaf ears, the plan was to have Hiruzen and Danzo lead a sneak attack on the Uchiha clan with Konoha's most powerful shinobi at the third Hokage's side. When they did so, it would have been a certain destruction of the Uchiha clan, and it would have opened up more questions among the other clans in the village that could threaten the stability of the village due to one of the four noble clans of Konoha being destroyed. While the third Hokage in the manga did ask Itachi to buy him time, the fact that Hiruzen referred to it as being a fight that he would want to avoid if possible. However, there within lies the problem. Violence was never off the table. It was only a last-ditch option, which is why there was a contingency plan, which is why Danzo told Itachi that Hiruzen would ultimately choose the village over the Uchiha if it came to it. This misunderstanding has led to so many people calling Itachi's decision selfish, but a clear look at all the information surrounding this time and how it ties into the complexity of feudal Japan's clan dynamics that the Naruto world draws heavy inspiration from, how it affected Itachi's conflicted decision, and ultimately his decision led to a ninja like Hashirama praising him for what he did in the name of the village. For 13-year-old Itachi, the decision to betray his clan for the greater good of the village was one that no 13-year-old child should ever have to make. But Itachi wasn't a child. Itachi was a shinobi. For a shinobi, there are things bigger than yourself. There are sacrifices that have to be made. Such is the way of the broken shinobi system that created this scenario where Itachi was forced to make an impossible decision. It was more than just killing clan members who he grew up with and established bonds with. It was shouldering the burden of being known as a clan killer, of being seen as the fallen prodigy of the Uchiha clan, who many in the clan and outside of the clan saw him as being one day being a potential Hokage candidate, and being known as the man who brought dishonor to the name of the Uchiha by wiping out his brethren, forcing a 13-year-old child with a newly awakened Mangekyo Sharingan to turn his Sharingan on and have the scarlet reflection of his Sharingan be forced to look at the crimson sea of blood of the very clan members who he himself shared blood with. It was the pinnacle of how broken the shinobi system was that a child was forced to make such a decision. In the Itachi Midnight novel, we're given a first-hand glance into how Itachi handled such a tragic decision, which in the manga, we're only given a small glimpse into his state of mind, but the anime added an anime original scene that peeled back the layers into the torment that befell Itachi, where Itachi sat in his room, looking depressed, refusing food from his mother in the lead up to the massacre. However, in the second Itachi novel, The Book of Midnight, we get more information on how conflicted Itachi truly was. He spent hours the day before the massacre with his head resting at the spot where Shisui jumped off the cliff, knowing full well that he was being watched by the Anbu Black Ops as well as Obito, crying tears, losing track of time, struggling to harden his heart to wipe out his clan, the nausea and pains in his head causing Itachi to slip in and out of consciousness, knowing what he was being forced to do. The day of the massacre, Itachi would again return to that very spot where he'd been crying tears, and his tormented soul would question if Shisui would ever forgive him for what he was about to do. Their plan had been to stop the Uchiha, but not wipe out the Uchiha. Thinking of his parents, Fugaku and Mikoto, his lover Izumi Uchiha, and the consequences of his inaction left Itachi in an emotional state as he spoke into the open air to Obito, who'd been watching from the shadows, that they would begin the massacre in 6 hours. And it's a good reason he felt so conflicted, and I'll explain to you why. In order to understand this, we have to look at the importance of clan honor and family honor in Japanese culture, in particular during the eras like the Meiji and the Nara eras of Japan. The way one conducted themselves was a reflection of their clan, their accomplishments, and their failures. It was also a reflection of the clan. Even things like clothing and marriage were reflections of the clan, for better or for worse. The honor of your clan/family is more important than your own freedom of you as a person or your own individual achievements. In feudal Japan, shame and dishonor affects the entire clan. One man's misdeeds can derail the entire clan. His daughters won't be married off to suitable husbands who could further the clan's status. His sons will be prevented from attaining jobs and rights that were previously made available to them, and his brothers will be forced to work twice as hard in order to get the same results that they previously would have gotten. It's why suicide was accepted in the military, where death of your own hands was acceptable instead of being captured or killed by the enemy. It was an escape from the shame that either of those outcomes would have brought. It's not a sin like it is in Christian cultures, which is something you have to understand, but rather it can be used as a way to preserve the honor of the family. When one person brings great shame to the family, in order to avoid being harmed or punished for the action of one rogue member, a clan would demand that the rogue clan member kill themselves instead of damaging the reputation of the clan, because their blood being spilled can restore a family that was tainted by the blemish of that person's misdeeds. For Itachi, choosing to side against his clan, who believed in their hearts that by starting a coup d'etat against Konoha, it was the right course of action for their clan, by choosing to side against them, Itachi had crossed over that line. However, the true tragedy is that being branded by a clan killer by those in the general public who didn't know the truth about why he did what he did, Itachi was viewed as having disgraced the honor of the mighty Uchiha clan to the highest degree. It's why Itachi plotted his own suicide via having Sasuke kill him, specifically wanting to die at Sasuke's hands because suicide was the only way to absolve him from the dishonor that he wore around his shoulders by striking down those in his clan. Even if it was for a greater good, he still had dishonor nonetheless. Dying at Sasuke's hands allowed him to atone for the sins and the crimes of killing his own clan, because he staged his own death, and his death would allow him to erase the misdeeds of his life, not just on massacring the clan, but also as a member of the Akatsuki, where he took on mercenary missions while working undercover for Konoha. In some Japanese religious beliefs, suicide can elevate oneself to a spiritual enlightenment. Death puts an end to everything, the shame and dishonor brought upon yourself and your family, the criticisms that your actions bring to both. Itachi sought to have his blood be spilled to release the Uchiha from the dishonor that he brought upon them, and to have Sasuke viewed as the last survivor of the Uchiha who restored the honor of the Uchiha clan. Think about all that. That's a lot for a 13-year-old child to carry on to his mind as he makes his decision, but Itachi wasn't a child anymore. He was a shinobi, expected to make decisions as an adult. The events of the Uchiha Massacre are more complicated than a lot of fans realize. It was more than just the murder of all of Itachi's clan members. Every man, woman, child, they were murdered. It was the closing of a future life that Itachi had thought about, which was proven by the first kills of the Uchiha Massacre and the final 2 kills of the Uchiha Massacre. It's a poetic symbolism for the future that Itachi had given up and severing the bonds with his clan. One set of kills represents the future waiting for Itachi in the form of his lover Izumi Uchiha and Izumi's mother, and then the other set of kills represented the severing of bonds from the Uchiha clan in the forms of Fugaku Makoto Uchiha. Starting with Izumi and her mother, Obito told Sasuke in volume 43 of the manga that Itachi had killed his lover, but those of you guys who are only familiar with the anime story might be under the impression that Itachi's lover was killed by Obito, which is false. Itachi killed Izumi, and she was the very first person that he killed during the massacre. It was a heartbreaking test to see if he could go through murdering his clan. If he could kill the young woman who he loved, then he could go through with killing the other clan members as well. Itachi waited for her inside of her house, listening to her voice, a voice that the novel says he knew all too well, and he waited until they were alone. Using his Mangekyo Sharingan Tsukiyomi, Itachi projected those feelings onto Izumi via a very elaborate genjutsu, where she lived out the next 80 years of her life as Itachi's girlfriend, then retiring as a ninja to have Itachi's children, raise his children, and dying as an 80-year-old woman with Itachi holding her hand at her bedside as she died. With tears in her eyes in real life from the genjutsu, Izumi's mind was destroyed by the genjutsu because it was so elaborate that her brain literally told her body to die when she died in the genjutsu, and she died in Itachi's arms, which I cover on a video on this channel as well. A heartbroken Itachi hovered over her body, telling Izumi thank you, and then proceeded to murder her mother, the very woman who was supposed to be Itachi's mother-in-law. Itachi was so shattered by the events that he fell onto his knees outside of their home, and Itachi was checked on by Obito, and Itachi quickly hardened his heart and continued on with the massacre. At the end of the massacre, he killed his parents, saving the final severance from the clan with their deaths by killing the two people who brought him into his world and made him a member of the Uchiha clan. At the age of 13, Itachi had to make grown-up decisions, which was expected of him as a shinobi, a culture at the time that had been generations in the making, where a ninja's duty to the village was before anything else. That sense of loyalty to the village as a shinobi was expected to run thicker than your own blood, and two Hokages made this much clear. Hashirama Senju stated that he'd kill his own child if they were deemed to be a threat of the village because it was his duty as Hokage. The village always came first. Minato's newborn child hadn't even drank his mother's breast milk yet, and he'd already made the decision to ignore his wife's pleas on her literal deathbed to allow her to take the Nine Tails with her to death. Also, Minato could raise their child. His words were not those of a father. His words were those of a Hokage. He stated that he couldn't forsake his village for his own selfish desires to raise their child, making Naruto a Jinchuriki. In the short term, maintained the balance of power between nations, but in the long term, it was his hope that Naruto could use that power to fight against the masked Uchiha that we now know to be Obito. Even as an academy student, Itachi was stated to have the wisdom of a Hokage. It's why he knew what needed to be done, but lost in all that hype of him being a genius with Kage level comprehension and skill was the fact that this was still a 13-year-old child, literally sobbing tears as he struggled to accept the dilemma and ultimatum that Danzo gave him. When he closed his eyes in the Itachi Book of Midnight novel, with tears in his eyes, he pictured the faces of the villagers and the Uchiha clan members on the bodies of the battlefield that Fugaku took him to at the age of 4 years old when Fugaku attempted to make Itachi awaken his Sharingan. That day, from all those years ago, even then had traumatized him, and the idea of seeing the friends that he made in the village and the clan members who he grew up with dead on the ground nearly brought vomit to the young Uchiha, who had been sobbing tears as he struggled. To say Itachi was selfish here, that's a grave disjustice to his character, and that's completely incorrect. It wasn't a choice only to save Sasuke. It was a choice ultimately to both stop the Uchiha from going on with the coup d'etat to laying the groundwork for another ninja war once another nation tried to invade Konoha after the coup, but it was also Itachi's shouldering the clan's fate and legacy by wiping it out, carrying the dishonor or turning against his clan by preventing the clan itself from ultimately dishonoring itself with their choice to carry out a coup to the village, which spits in the face of what a shinobi is supposed to do. Just as loyalty to one's clan is above one's own individual achievements and ambitions, in the world of Naruto, the loyalty to one's village is held up higher than even one's own clan. The Uchiha, if they succeeded, would have dishonored themselves as a clan of ninja. Any Hokage that they appointed, likely Fugaku, by overthrowing the Konoha government, it wouldn't go over well. By slaughtering the clan, Itachi prevented them from falling even further than they had, regardless as to how they got to that point, regardless as to who wronged who. But ultimately, his plan to have Sasuke kill him would have been him serving as a sacrificial lamb that atoned for the sins of the Uchiha, which is why in the anime original scenes in the Book of Itachi Midnight anime adaptation, when Itachi explained his plans to Fugaku and Makoto, both parents were emotional knowing the route that Itachi was taking, stating that his suffering would last longer than theirs, and knowing that Sasuke was the last Uchiha would be meant to be a shining example of what the best of the Uchiha, untainted by the clan, could have been living in this new world. Where it is selfish is Itachi trying to reach that point alone, all by himself, but the age of 13, being forced to make a decision like that and to live the next 8 years of his life with the shame of being a clan killer and being isolated as he was forced to make that decision, all while knowing if he did nothing, it was still going to be Obito in the shadows plotting against the Uchiha, plotting against the village. It was an impossible choice. The Uchiha were always going to fall. A shinobi system that gives children a headband and expects them to put the village before anyone else, even their own blood. A shinobi system that at one point had 7 and 8-year-old children out on the battlefield carrying out missions, taught to suppress their emotions to carry out those missions, all while their own brains are still those of children. That is a shinobi system that is broken. That was a shinobi system that placed Itachi in a situation where there was no guarantee for peace. If the talks with Hiruzen and Fugaku broke down, which by that point, they would have broken down due to how far gone Fugaku was, Konoha would wipe out the clan in response. Itachi had no guarantee either way, except to either raise the sword against the clan, who would never see him coming, or side with the clan and die with the clan. It was a tragic tale made even sadder when you realize Itachi at a young age saw the issues with the Uchiha and with the village, as well as issues with the shinobi system, and dreamed of being Hokage and carrying out a plan for peace. But that same shinobi system that he sought to change had pushed him into a corner to make a decision to slaughter his clan for the sake of the village that Itachi was a shinobi of. Which, for anybody curious about Itachi's Hokage dream, I recommend going to my first channel, Kryptonian Saiyan, and looking at the video about Itachi's Hokage dream. That is the complexity of Itachi's decision to slaughter the Uchiha, which in turn is what makes his character so tragic, because the dishonor he carried came directly from the fact that the shinobi system placed him in that situation. However, that's gonna be it for my video. I know some of you guys are gonna call this a Itachi apologist video, which is not the intention. I just merely wanted to touch on information I know a lot of people overlook that comes from the novels and other reference material while looking into Japanese and Asian importance on family honor, clan honor, disloyalty, and the suicide tradition of maintaining and restoring honor. All this information, in my opinion, paints Itachi, a 13-year-old child, in a different light when you consider everything that went into the decision to massacre the Uchiha. However, while you think that over, consider watching these other videos you see on the screen right now.